Hello, everyone. Welcome. We are live today. This is the Neurodiversity Media Network. I am Briar Harvey, and today we're going to be having a really amazing conversation, I hope, about chosen family. So, first, I'd like for our delightful panelists to introduce themselves. We will start with the fabulous Biba Atta, who has a show here on the network called Personal Evolution. Biba, welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm Biba Atta. I am a personal evolution facilitator, energy healing practitioner, and also a government contracting consultant. It's just rather new. And I'm
Say
glad to
all
be.
of those things 5 times fast, y'all.
I won't.
Okay. We'll get into why you are here and how you have gotten around to your chosen family in a few minutes. Heather, welcome. The fabulous Heather Claus, everyone, and she has a show here on the network called The Neurospicy Guide to Dating, where we talk about all of those scary things about dating. Heather, welcome.
Hey, y'all. Good to be here. Always a pleasure.
And all right. So today we are talking about chosen family. And we got here because because of the holidays. And what happens for so many neurospicy people, I find, is that the holidays are the stress point, the straw that breaks the camel's back. And inevitably, come January, I am hearing stories about folks who are having to go no contact or low contact with their families of origin because they're still being treated like children. They are not being treated as adults. The adults in their life are not acknowledging the damage that they have potentially caused. They're not willing to apologize. Frankly, they're not acting like adults should in adult situations with other adults. And this often gets pegged as narcissism, but I think especially with neurospicy folks in general, it's a lot of trauma and undiagnosed neurodivergence. And so we end up in a really uncomfortable place of being the people who are responsible for doing the healing. And that's not always our jobs. So I want to talk first about your stories a little bit, and then we'll talk about the specifics of finding a chosen family, about how to navigate being no contact, and how to navigate boundaries, right? So, yes, Heather, I know. It'll be amazing. Biba is also like firm on the boundaries, y'all. So, and these are important places to have boundaries, frankly, both when setting what you will and will not do with families of old and what you will and will not tolerate with families who are new. So, all right, we'll just do this in alphabetical locational order. Biba, give us your story a little bit. Tell me about your family and why you have built chosen family.
Ooh, we're starting off with the heavy hitter questions. I see. My families, I have my mother and my father, they were married up until I was in, I believe, like second grade is when they decided to get divorced. And from there, it's been an interesting co-parenting navigational system between my parents. One where my mom is the solo caregiver for my sister and I. And over the years, we have maintained a relationship with my father, open contact. But it's been really harmful, like some of the things that we've gone through when we were younger, where there was visitation, so we'd stay, and things were said or not said, and done and not done. And over the years, we've just, well, for me, I'll speak for myself, like I'm not really sure about my sister, but over the years I just thought that it was important, or it's been passed down to me how important it is to maintain a relationship with him. And I came to a particular point, something huge happened on our side, on his side of the family, where we found out about a relative or something like that. And it really just kind of rocked the boat with the family. Like it kind of like a big boulder had been dropped in the middle of somewhere, and then it's the ripple effect of everything. And based upon that situation that occurred, it really highlighted harmful behavior. It really highlighted how I wasn't seen and heard the way that I desired to be in my relationship with my father. It highlighted how he believed that the things that he wanted, for whatever the reason he wanted them for, trumped how I felt and what I needed in the moment to process what this whole huge thing was. So because it wasn't in his time frame, and because he felt, even though there was nothing that I said that was negative, he felt that any reaction other than complete, like, yes, let's everybody do this, there was negativity. And then we had quite an interesting couple of conversations after that happened, where I'm trying to explain like my point of view and why I needed some more time to process. And on the front part, it's like understood, and on the back end, it's not understood. So I find out about the back end, which of course was very hurtful, because I'm like, I don't understand like why you're not hearing me. I don't know how much more clearer I can be. And we had some words, or more like he had words in a text message exchange about something completely different, just went off. And it was just such just deplorable behavior. And when I saw it, I opened it up, and it was another one of these long text messages. And I'm like, oh God, what could this possibly say? And the first paragraph I'm reading, and I'm just like starting to feel my anxiety start to amp up. And I started laughing about the first paragraph, but then we get further into it. And then I'm reading it, and I'm like, oh my God, like I can't believe he said this. I cannot believe that he said this. But interestingly enough, there were some things that I was feeling intuitively and in my body about some of our exchanges. And no one else had these same kind of circumstances that I did. So when I felt that, and when he said what he said, I'm like, I was right this whole time. Like I just knew it. But there was really nothing that I can like really like land on to explain to my family. Like what I'm feeling is true. Like I'm not making stuff up. I'm not, trying to be a victim or anything like that. Like this is actually true. And so they can see it like in black and white in print on the phone, like screenshot a message, that what I was thinking, what I was feeling was actually true. And that was when I decided, like, through a series of breakdowns, like a lot of crying, come to Jesus meetings with my friends, my chosen family, basically, to block him. I decided to become no contact, and I've been estranged from him for 2 years now. And it's been a journey. I think we're going to have more conversation about like this part, like once you make that decision to be no contact, like what that actually means and what that feels like, and how it is like a wave. It's not okay, I've blocked him on all the things, but there is all the rest of the stuff that comes with it. And there's the grieving, there's the anger and the sadness, and then there's the feeling of being on the defense because people are coming at you about like, well, that's, you can't not talk to the parent, and the guilt and the shit, like it's a whole thing. And I had no idea until I pressed that block button, and then it was like on and popping from there, even till now. So I'm sure we'll talk more about that, but I definitely want to hear your story, Nookie. So
my story is different. I actually have a great relationship with none of my blood family. But that's actually kind of tricky because as far as I know, throughout my life, I've only had one blood relation, and that is my mother. She was adopted. We never found out who her family was. And then she was sexually assaulted, and I'm the result of that. So when she passed away some years ago, I was left with my non-biological stepfather, who I absolutely adore. I'm on great terms with him, and my stepmother. And, you know, having been an only child, and an odd one at that, I have explored, and this is where I'm bringing a very different perspective, different ways of connecting with people. I hitchhiked across the country with a friend. I joined the carnival and ended up with 22 older brothers. I roamed New York City with street people. I have joined the kink community and traveled around the world and taught kink. I am non-monogamous, and I have a chosen family built there. And then, of course, I work with a lot of people through my coaching who, because they are kinky, or because they are non-monogamous, or because they are neurospicy, or because they're a combination of all of those things, which is actually more likely the case than not. So I work with a lot of people who need to learn how to communicate with their family in the ways that their families can receive that, and or learn how to build that wall and set that boundary and, you know, go no contact.
I have a very large family of whom I speak to almost none of. My mother passed more than 20 years ago now. I've been no contact with my father for well over a decade. And everyone else has just kind of filtered out. It's been somewhat traumatic and a great kind of loss for me. My husband's family has adopted me, although there's not a whole lot of them either. So it's really been a challenge for me to find chosen family that sticks around long term, to find communities that I didn't get my autism diagnosis until 2 years ago. So truly, I think that was probably a lot of my problem in the past, and I had no fucking clue. So now it's about building that basically from scratch. And it's always a process, y'all. This is hard, traumatic work for so many of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that while there is a great body of work around how to sever relationships, there is much less energy spent on building the relationships that are functional and meaningful, especially when you are an adult. Where do you meet people? How do you find friends? Like, this is truly the question of my time. Like, every place I've looked in the past has not panned out in truly meaningful ways, except for online, and even that is fraught for me. So, the number of communities I have found myself excluded from or asked to leave, right? And again, the odds of me having missed a social norm, it's really high at this point. And I just and I never knew. Nobody told me. I still, in many cases, do not know what it was that I did wrong to be asked to leave, which is horrible. So let's start, I think, with the success. Tell me good stories, y'all. I want to hear. Biba, I definitely want you to talk about Nature Church.
Mhm.
And Nookie, I definitely want to hear more about your circus clan. But let's start with really great places where you've built chosen family.
Ooh. So I told you a story about Nature Church. How Nature Church started was that I was off from work for a period of time. Um, and over the holidays, I think it was like in December, January, and I was like, I really want to get out a bit more and meet people or just do some things that I don't normally do. And I was like, where's a good place to look for some people who were doing some pretty cool things that I might find some new interest? Well, why not get on Meetup? So I was on Meetup searching through the different groups for different events, and I saw one for a labyrinth walk. And I said, this is going to be great. And then I've seen a labyrinth, didn't know that we had one anywhere near where I was. So I was excited to go. We get to the day of, the lady who's a facilitator, she's not able to attend, but she says you can still go and, you just walk around. Like, that literally is it. So I go, and there were two other ladies that were there. There was one lady who was complaining a lot, and both her and I had no idea, like, do you set intentions? Are you praying? Like, is there something that you're supposed to do to make this meaningful? But the other lady who was there, she had been there before and she had done walks before. So she said she, gave us some guidelines, and then she actually went first. So we're walking through this process through the labyrinth, and there was a period when we got to the middle of the labyrinth, and the other lady just basically checked out. She just was ready to continue to complain about the process, and some other lady with a dog came out of nowhere. Don't even know where she came from. So she was off, like, complaining with her. And I felt this feeling, and I heard, invite the other lady, the one who was the guide, to Nature Church. So Nature Church really is being out in nature. It's a church of nature is what I like to call it. And so there's a local park that I go to, and you just walk and be amongst the trees, talking through or feeling through the week, and crying and hugging trees and touching grass and earthing, like the whole thing. So by the time I leave there, I always feel like I've expressed everything that I needed to express to set a tension for the next week or whatever. So it is a sacred practice for me. So I'm not inviting anybody to that. Not people I know, not people I like, not people I love, and definitely, absolutely not strangers. So the intuitive hit to invite this stranger to my sacred practice of Nature Church was like, are you freaking serious? This is what y'all want me to do? Like, you want me to invite this strange lady, like, to this thing that is like my life now? Are you kidding me? And of course, at this point, I'm like, I may not have liked it, but whenever I get intuitive hits, they're never wrong. So I always listen, even though I may protest. So I'm like, God, I can't have anything. So I asked the lady if she would join me for Nature Church, and she was like so gung ho about it. I was hoping she would say no. And then we exchanged information. And the day before, she was just like, hi, just checking back in. Are we going to be meeting up for nature church? I was hoping she forgot, but she didn't. Met her at the park, and she has been one of my closest friends. We've been friends now for like over, I think we're on 8 years now. Like, we walked every Sunday for a good 6 years until she moved away. Whenever I've been out of town or out of the country, and same thing for her, like every Sunday at the same time, we get on the phone. She's in a respective park wherever she is. I'm in a park where I am, and we are doing nature church together. Like, one of my closest friends. Like, she is freaking amazing. I would have never, ever, ever, ever invited her to nature church had it not been for my spiritual team. Like, hey, you need to invite her to your thing. And I'm like, absolutely the hell not. But that would have been a complete and total loss of my life. So, yeah.
I can totally relate to that whole it's coming up, and I'm hoping they're not going to like text or call or remember. Like, this is just like my introversion speaking here. But yeah, you know, like I like being alone. I would really like to like being alone when I invited this person over, but oh, okay.
Here we are.
Yeah. So for me, I have throughout my life somehow found myself in groups of certain types of people. Maybe because I'm odd. You know, I felt like I was going to, you know, join the carnival, and it was going to be a party. You know, I was 15 years old. I turned 16 in the carnival, and I thought I was going to be like partying every night, like all the, you know, the cool people that were carnies. And instead I ended up with, you know, 22 overprotective older brothers. Right. And so I learned a lot about how, you know, the phrase honor amongst thieves, you know, honor amongst carnies. You know, I was a carny, and despite the fact that I was a woman or a female, I was probably more of a girl at the time. I was not a townie, so therefore I didn't get the treatment that the townie women did as they came through. But I saw it, and it was incredibly like sexist and misogynist, and, you know, full of like horrible things that they would do and say and whatever, but I was theirs. So, you know, that stuff didn't happen to me. And they also made sure that the townie boys knew that that stuff would not happen to me. Mm-hmm. You know, take, you know, a couple years, you know, into the future, and I'm living near New York City, and I was wandering around New York City one day. Just, I had come down for a 3-day weekend. I had a 3-day weekend every other weekend. And I ended up meeting this. He seemed like such an adult at the time. I think he was probably like 19. I think I was, you know, 17, right? Like, so such an adult. And this street kid who had run away from New Orleans and ended up in New York. And we were hanging out like kind of all weekend. And like, instead of going to the SRO that I used to, you know, like stay in that weekend, I hung out with him and like, you know, these abandoned buildings and stuff. And by the end of the weekend, I realized he assumed that I was also homeless. And because I'd left my bag at Port Authority in a locker. And I just would kind of fade in and out. I would pop up every 2 weeks or so, spend a weekend, you know, with street people in New York City, and, you know, wander around. I got to learn something about the tunnels, which was kind of weird. It's not like they look in the movies, although it's not all that different either. It's very strange. And then moving into, you know, starting to create my own family, getting into an abusive marriage, getting out of it, and then figuring out my diagnoses and figuring out why I'd always been just a little little different than everybody. I mean, it wasn't a huge difference. I'm ADD and I have empathy deficit disorder, but it was enough of a difference that it always felt like everybody else was experiencing things that I didn't. And that's because they were. And so then I intentionally said, I am not going to go through an abusive relationship again. And I want to surround myself with love. And went out there and I found my kinky, non-monogamous tribe and essentially just built it one person at a time. You know, people would come into my life and I would let them go just as easily if they were not a good fit. And some people just ended up growing on me like fungi. And so, you know, now we have this like amazing core of humans that I can rely on, you know, for whatever. I just recently had 4 surgeries over 9 months, and, you know, they were all, you know, there, anything you need, you know, whatever. We have a slightly larger group of people that are just as loving and just as caring, just not quite as close. Maybe those are like, you know, the cousins and the aunties and, you know, so on and so forth. And then because I've always felt sort of out of place, community in kink has always been a focus of mine. So I have put a lot of time and effort into education and building community and nurturing community. And I run, you know, a local Discord that's like some 2,000 people strong, and help keep the community safe through a hosts and organizers resources group. And yeah, so I have what I would consider a very complex Venn diagram of family, chosen family, and many of the people within that family have, you know, stories that are, you know, less positive, but they too have been drawn to the idea of accepting people as they are, giving them grace for, you know, being human, because we are all very human ourselves, and letting go of the, you know, people and experiences that do not serve who we are today.
And you have a wall of pictures over the holidays. You told me about this. Tell us about your Christmas tradition.
So, sometime in November, my partner says to me, he says, so I'd like to have a more, you know, traditional holiday. I'd like to really celebrate this year, which we've never really done. I'm like, okay. And when he tells me this, I immediately think to, you know, my holiday traditions and think, holy fudge, I am already 6 weeks behind on the crafting. But I set to, I cut out hundreds of paper shapes and built giant folded paper poinsettias, like big, like I think the smallest ones were probably a foot across and the larger ones were probably, you know, 18 inches. And in the center of each
bigger, go home.
Yeah, it was, I mean, I was like, okay, I'm going to fill up a wall. Why the heck not? In the center of each one was a photo, either of a single person or of a couple or of, you know, family units or whatever, of, you know, people that we cared about and that we wanted with us during the holiday season. And so on Christmas Day, mostly because that's the day that most of the people we know celebrate, we're just, you know, kind of like, okay, holidays, woo, reasons to give gifts and, you know, do things. We took video. So we would start like zoomed in on a particular friend's picture. We would say, you know, just wanted to let you know, we're so grateful to have you in our lives. And we are thankful to have you here with us on our wall as a part of our chosen family and friends, even though you are not with us, physically. And then, we zoomed back out and showed the entire wall so they could get an idea of the scope of how they were being included in our lives.
I love it so, so much. That's like the dream now, to have a family big enough to have a wall, my friend. So,
well, I mean, it only
let's
takes one picture if the picture is big enough.
Okay. So kink is a little bit different, but not that much, really. So where are you meeting people? How are you finding them?
So with kink, I mean, the easy answer is FetLife, right? Because that's the kinky Facebook, essentially. You get on FetLife, you create a little account and you say, here are the things I'm into, or here are the things I think I might be into because I've been watching too many like videos down rabbit holes, right? And then you get there and you look at the events and you see what's going on in my area. So in kink, we have these things called munches or sloshes. A munch is essentially a gathering of kinky folk in a vanilla setting, usually with food, where you can meet other kinky folk. Sloshes are a gathering of kinky folk in vanilla settings, usually at a brewery or a bar, again, where you can meet other kinky folk. I'm really lucky in that I feel like RDU, Triangle area of North Carolina, after all of my travels in many places around the world, is probably one of the most active and sustaining communities. I would say, I'm not a small part of that, but I'm not all of it either. There were things going on even before I really jumped into a lot of things. But we have had, for 22 or 23 years, we've had a femdom club that meets every month. We've got a weekly munch, slosh that goes on where right now, before pandemic, it was maybe, 30 or 40 people on a Monday night. Now you can get anywhere between 70 and 180 people on a Monday night. And this is every Monday night, right? People just come out and meet. So, we also have a Discord. So people come to the Discord and they're like, hey, I'm new to all this and I'm kind of scared to go out. And people are like, well, come find me. I'll be wearing, the pink hat with, blue roses and, say hello and I'll introduce you to a couple of people. But part of that is, when I created the Discord, I very specifically wanted to create a culture that welcomed new people and gave people a chance to find their place to fit in. And so we do a lot of, protecting the community when people are just not a fit. But we also do a lot of what I would consider Briar, maybe you didn't get, and that is interventions and course corrections. We do end up doing that with a lot of neurospicy people. And, some will say, okay, how can I do better? And, we'll work with them. And some say, well, I'm autistic and everybody just hates me. And we say, well, you're not ready to be a part of a community then, because this is not hate when we're coming to you with love and trying to give you the tools for success. So yeah, and that's a cultural thing. And I guess I definitely strongly suggest to anyone, that's looking for a community of any sort, the Neurospicy, game night. Get a bunch of people together in your area, tell everybody to bring their board games, do your own meetup once a month and bring Neurospicy people together and have a game night, or, do a non-monogamy, question and answer night, or do, a slosh or a munch, or, whatever it is for whatever you're into. And just, as they say, be the change you want to see in the world. Create the culture for the family that you want to show up. Plus, I have a plan in kink, so that's kind of a.
But you bring up an important point. In so many cases, there is an established community where you can go in and be a part of the community rather than trying to reinvent it from scratch. Biba, this
Oh
is
yeah.
something you and I have talked about a lot. I know you started with meetups, right? Like you had a lot of, it wasn't just the nature church, that
Mhm.
you spent a lot of time doing meetups, right?
Not too much time doing meetups. I think at that time when I was into meetups, I had just made a pact with myself that I wanted to get out more. I mean, because let's just be honest. I mean, you're working and you're home, and that's pretty much what a lot of people have time for. So, um, like especially pre-pandemic, like we're working and we're home, and so I really wanted to kind of get out of my bubble and just do something that was different. And, of course, that means meeting people. So meetup was definitely something. If you like whatever your interests are, like there is some sort of group or many groups that are there. So if you like chess, there's probably a chess group. If you want to learn Spanish, there's probably a Spanish speaking group. If you want to go cross country skiing, there is a group on there. So you can find them. And if you are someone who I was traveling a lot for work, so I could also go on there and find like local groups to where I'm getting ready to be. Not that I ever went on any of those kinds of I didn't really participate that much, but I knew that that was something that I could do, because when I was working and traveling, it's like you're just working in a different location. It's not a vacation. So there wasn't really that much time to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to do a couple of meetup groups while I'm out here. Like there was no time for that. So, but meetup is definitely one of those groups where you can find a community of people. Toastmasters, like it's a bunch of stuff. It's a bunch of stuff out there.
And I think that's really important. You have to figure out what the local regional channel is. Unfortunately, because I hate it, in Omaha, Nebraska, it does seem to be Facebook groups. And so I have to go and find the appropriate Facebook group to go and join and then go and do those events. So it's really a lot of times about having to figure out the ways in which your local people are already communicating with each other. And that can take some trial and error. Okay.
Yeah.
Once you've found a place, how do you get plugged in? Nookie, we'll start with you because obviously
Mm,
we have a whole guide for dating on this one. So, like, plugging
yeah.
in a
Yeah. So getting plugged into a community, it's tough, especially for the neurospicy, right? Like it can be super challenging. Social cues, also desperation, really wanting to be liked, over enthusiasm. It's a big thing. A show up. Um, that's that's kind of a big part of things, actually showing up. What will happen a lot of times is people will, attend something once and then they'll be like, oh yeah, I went to the thing and, nobody really paid any attention to me. Well, nobody, especially if there's a bunch of other neurospicy people, well, unless they specifically have some outgoing greeter types, the last thing that they want to do is go talk to somebody they don't know. And you just happen to be somebody they don't know. So you have to be ready to show up more than once, right? Now, if they're actively harmful to you, that's different. But there's a wide gulf between I don't know people and they don't know me, and these people are being harmful. Another thing is to release the impulse to people please,
Mm.
to offer yourself as anything, over enthusiastically. It's scary to neurotypicals to have somebody come in and immediately start throwing themselves into, hey, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can help you with this. It feels, very claustrophobic, mentally claustrophobic when that happens. But again, a lot of neurospicy people, they know things. Like me, I have a planning kink. So, I go into a place and I see, well, gosh, the person planning this might not be so good at this. My initial, reaction is, I can help with that. And my second reaction very quickly following that one is, no, that is not for me to do, right? They did not ask. And often, as I'm just going to throw this out there, offering advice is actually criticism. Hey, that's a social cue that a lot of people who are different in the head do not realize. We're like, oh yeah, if of course they want to know how to do this better. They don't want to know how to do this better. I promise you. So there's that as well, right? I do recommend, though, offering assistance, but not being specific about, I will do this for you, I can do that for you. Just say, hey, like, I'm trying to get out here, I'm trying to get to know people. I have found if I'm given a job that's much more comfortable for me, feel free to give me any of the jobs that you don't want. Like, and that often lands people in a much more comfortable space, especially if they're willing to say, I have a little bit of social anxiety. I'm just, I'm trying to get out here and get to know people. And if that doesn't result in something positive, then you realize that maybe this is not the right, friend group for you. And not every friend group is going to be, whether you are, neurospicy or not. That's, how many different Christian churches do we have in America, right? Like, every single one of those came as a result of somebody saying, well, F y'all, I'm going to go start my own religion because this is where I'm going to feel comfortable.
This is such a good point. Such a good point.
Understand that when we're talking about finding and creating chosen family, and, Briar, you and I talk about this quite a bit. Be radically neurospicy. Own it. Say, here's who I am. I'm inviting people to opt in to all this. And then let them opt in or not, because the most amazing of our chosen family are going to be the people that see all the warts, all the peccadillos, all the kooky, craziness, all of the, oh, wow, that's the alien behind that mask you've been presenting, and still love you. Or better yet, love you for it, right? Like, friend, sexy times, queer platonic partner, no strings attached, booty call, whatever they are, if they're going to come in and fit well and then end up sticking around, it's because you were able to be yourself with them.
So important. That is so important. You gave a lot of really great tips, and the ones that I liked the most were about being yourself, like not only just showing up, but showing up fully and completely as who you are. That gives people, that allows people to determine the kind of relationship or the connection that they want to have with you right off of the bat. I mean, if they don't know who you are and they're getting to know and connect and be interested or have these synergies with someone who doesn't even really exist because it's not really authentically you, then it's not going to be there. you're not going to be able to ride off into the sunset for a really long time in this connection, because who you are is going to seep through the mask at some point. Like, we can't be fake. We can't lie, but for so long it does something to our bodies, it does something to our spirit by not being authentic. And it's a burden to carry that no one should have to carry. So showing up as authentic is like the move. Like, you'll feel free, and there are still other people who are like, yeah, that's the one I want to meet. The one over there dancing all crazy when no one else is out on the dance floor, because you really like to dance and you love music and that's what you like to do, but you don't normally do it because people think it's weird. No, freaking do it. Because there's other people who are like, I want to do more of that. I got to meet this person. They seem interesting. And that's how really strong connections are formed. So don't feel like you have to be someone else. I mean, even with the missing of the social cues and all that, just still be yourself, communicate like, hey, like, this is who I am. Sometimes I miss social cues. I'm not trying to be offensive or anything like that, but and people will be understanding, and those who are not understanding, they're not your people. So let them just go over there to the left, although it might be right on your screen, not sure, but to the left, like, it's
all
fine.
of a sudden I'm doing the Cupid shuffle, it's
somewhere, but whatever's happening, but they're not your people, and that's fine. You want to have space in your life for people who are your people, who get you, who love you just as you are, and love you for those things that you're just like, I need to hide this, as Nookie mentioned. So yeah, show up as you.
Who wants to create a new family that you have to mask with constantly, like even in your most intimate moments? Like it and I will just tell you this, this is something that I've been sort of ranting about today, is that like on Facebook, I'm constantly seeing these, like, one of them today was, what is masculinity in a woman and why do men hate it? And I was like, okay, this is some BS right here. And, I said, it's interesting because I'm writing this little book on people pleasing right now. And I realized that kind of talk from men is both like assumptive, it's infantilizing, it's patronizing, it's misogynistic, and it feeds right into most AFABs like socialization programming to please. Who do I need to be to please this other human? And then AMABs, they have their own issues, right? You need to be, buff and tall and, big and strong and, like all of these things, right? These things that we've been socialized and conditioned to believe are necessary for boinking, love, all of the things, right? And why would I want to make myself less so that somebody else can pretend to be more? Why would I want to find myself in a relationship where I constantly have to be something inauthentic in order to maintain that relationship? And that is like a huge, like, platform sort of soapbox for me right now. Is why would I want anybody in my life that doesn't want to be in my life because me? That makes no sense.
And the other thing that you said that I really want to highlight is the frequency of having to do this. That you have to show up, much like church, once a week, once a month.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, but once is not enough. You cannot go one time and expect to get some kind of magical relationship out. That happens in the movies, occasionally at nature church, but mostly you have to show up over and over and over.
There's,
You're gonna have to
every
write.
once in a while you have that connection, right? Where you're like, this person, this is my person, right? Like you show up for D&D and all of a sudden you're a part of a D&D game and you're not going anywhere or whatever. But if we turn this around and we say, okay, think of something you are really, really, really good at and passionate about, and your, stamp collecting group or your hedgehog racing group, or, the particulars on, the bloodlines of miniature bull terriers or whatever. And somebody comes into your club and says, hey, I want to do this. I know all about it. And you're like, who are you to tell me, right? But this is what we tend to do when we're going out there trying to oopsies.
Yeah. You're going to have to write the check. You're going to have to write the check. I always say I find myself in these situations where I've written a check that my ass does not want to cash. Like in the moment, it's like I've written this check and I'm like, because you start to feel yourself for a minute. You're like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And you're feeling good. And then you sign up for it and you're like, I'm going to rock this. Then you get there and then you're like, the fuck was I thinking? Like, I wrote a check that my ass does not want to cash. You're going to have to write the check. But you know what happens even in those situations is like at the end, it's like, shit, I've done it.
Yeah.
I've done it. Or this is a story I get to tell now. Or this is an amazing experience I ended up having. Or someone was like, they love what I said, or they love what I did, or I made a connection and they want me to come back. And I really felt good about that. Maybe not when I walked in the door, when I realized that the check I wrote, it has to be cashed. Maybe in that moment that felt crappy, but I did the thing and I feel so like I'm gone. I'm so high now because I did the thing. And I want to come back and have more of those experiences, or I want to write more checks in other places and have that same experience. I don't want to feel bad when I have to cash a check, but the other part on the other end of that, like what you get after the check is cashed, is like that's what's worth it. So you're gonna have to write the check.
Yeah,
you're gonna have to write the check.
Okay. Does look like Heather is at least physically frozen in quite a laugh. Is it just me, Biba? Can you see her?
Heather is frozen.
I am not frozen. Can you hear me?
We hear you.
We can hear you. So it's great.
That is really, really. If you're seeing what I'm seeing, that's really unpleasant.
I'm gonna move a little.
And it kind of represents me. So, okay, we're going to roll with it.
It's fine. It's fine. So, okay. Let's talk about, we're showing up. We're not taking over. We are plugging our way in, and we're doing that fairly regularly. What do we need to do to make this a habit or routine, depending on how we respond personally to either one of those words?
Well, I think the start is that you make it a commitment. Mm-hmm. When you make a commitment to yourself and you list the reasons why I'm going to do this because, and you've solidified that this is important to you for all of these reasons, and you committed to it for that, that's the start. So when you get there and you're connecting or not, or you're eating the food or you're not, or you're having the drinks or you're not, or you're having a great time or you're not, you have to remind yourself to go back to the commitment. Like, well, what was this all for? Like, I put some clothes on. I put a bra on, for God's sake. And I put a wig on, baby. And I put on some lipstick. And I put on some freaking heels. And I have now left my cozy home. I'm in my car. I done drove way yonder, paid to park, right? I've done all of these things that I would rather not do. And now I'm here because I committed to something. There's a reason I'm out here. So regardless of whatever happens in there, you have to come back and remind yourself of the commitment, and you got to play the game. So whatever it was that you committed to or why you decided that this was the thing, then you're going to have to show up and be able to say like, well, I did this so that I can have this experience. Like you want to pull up your little checkbox and be able to say like, if the purpose of going here was to meet people, you can't just be a wallflower sipping and watching all the people go by. Like you don't meet anybody if you're just sitting there and you're waiting for people to come to you. I mean, it's scary to approach people. It's scary to introduce yourself. It's scary, the elevator pitch or whatever, to talk, whatever you're talking about. But if you're saying that I've done all of this to meet people, if I come out of here and I've met one person, then I've fulfilled the list. I've done the thing. That means you got to go up and you got to introduce yourself to somebody. You have to do it. So you've done it. And then you have to say, okay, and celebrate that you did it. Don't go in there and start talking about whatever didn't happen, whatever you were hoping to happen, and focusing on all of the negative. Focus on, I made a commitment. I put on the wig. I put a bra on, for God's sake, with the lipstick baby and the heels or whatever. Got in my car, left my cozy home. I did all of this. I was in here. I met one person. I did it. That really is it. And I can do it again. So I'm going to come back next week.
Yeah. I would say there's two parts of this. One part is, it's kind of like a workout routine, right? You want to be, the world's best pogo sticker. I don't know. And, the first time you get on a pogo stick, you're not going to be the world's best. You might be the world's most amusing. You might be the world's most bruised, but you're not going to be the world's best. So you have to decide, this is something that I am working towards. I have to enjoy the process. I have to do it for the sake of doing it, not doing it specifically for an immediate result. That's a huge key, right? Because I know that a lot of neurospicy people, especially in like their people-pleasing mode, because they've been taught when they were young, if you don't act a certain way, it feels like your family does not love you or your family does not understand you or whatever. So you learn to act these ways, and that often includes people pleasing. But when they're in this people pleasing mode, it's, well, I was good and I behaved. Why didn't they like me? Right. And there's a myriad of reasons of what could have happened, but that's a big factor. It's like, you have to do the things for yourself. You're committing to these things for you. This is part of you being radically neurospicy and heading towards your goals, whatever your goals are, being the world's best pogo sticker, getting banged or laid or whatever it is. Like, I don't know what your goals are, but whatever they are, you have to choose those steps for yourself, and you have to commit to them for you because that's important to you. The second thing I think is really helpful is in any situation where you suddenly don't know what to do, or you're suddenly feeling that, uh-oh, and what do I do now? First thing that I always recommend, pause. Just pause. Give yourself a few minutes, not minutes, moments. Give yourself a few moments to take a deep breath and ask yourself, WWYD, what would you do? Right? What would I do in this situation if I were my best version of myself in this situation? What is going to be me 3 years from now? How do I be that person now to get the most out of this situation? And that for me has gotten me out of a lot of awkward, strange places. It's just to say, what would future me do? What would the person who feels comfortable in this situation, which will be me in X amount of time, what would they do? they would walk up to somebody and say, "Hi, I'm new here. Where do I get a drink?" Or whatever it is. That's been a huge key, because I read some years ago a book by Richard Wiseman. He's a UK social psychologist, and he's the only person who has done studies on luck. And he also did some really interesting studies on how the human brain works. And he wrote a book called The As If Factor. And I'd been doing something similar for a good portion of my life, but he put it into words. Learn who you would be in a situation by imagining it in your head, and then act as if you are already that person. And that's why I say pause and take a moment, take that deep breath, and then say, who would I be? And then move forward as if you are already that person, right? The genuine article, not, no bluster, no cockiness, or, just what would I do if I were already comfortable in this situation? And then go for it. And you're still going to screw up. Let me just be clear about that. Like, this does not get you over the hurdles of being human. It just gets you past the hurdle of being frozen. And you'll get better, and you'll screw up less often and in more creative ways as you go.
Yes, because practice doesn't make perfect. It just makes practice. So
Perfect
you just
practice
do
makes
it.
perfect. But what does that even look like? I don't know.
In relationships, man, I don't know.
Well, the challenge
Is
with
there?
relationships, as soon as you get perfect at it, like now, it changes in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Because you're humans.
Right. Because we change. And truly, while my chosen family is not as big as I would like it to be, that is the lesson I am learning, right? We're all human. We're all doing it together, and we get to decide what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. And we
So
get to
I
decide if
hope
something
that-
doesn't look right for us. And
Yes.
that's also like and that's where the cutting people off, or reducing contact, or de-escalating the relationship. I'm going to de-escalate this cat into my lap right now. Understanding that no matter how hopeful you might have been at the beginning, sometimes it's not going to work, and it is your right to do something about that. That is, I guess if you look at like creating your chosen family like a garden, right? You have to put in a lot of work before you start to see blooms, right? There's a lot of weeding, and there's a lot of, digging around and grubbing around and getting yourself dirty and, sweaty, and not doing things that you really love, but you have to do them. And then once things are blooming and you're starting to reap the rewards, you have to cut some things back that are choking off the real blooms that could be happening, and the real magic and some of those things are going to be perennials. They're just going to keep coming and keep coming. And some of those things are going to be pretty for a season or for a couple of days, and then they're going to go away, right? This is how life is. And if you're anything like me and your ADHD brain hates change, that's going to be frustrating when something seemingly changes and there's nothing you can do about it. Accept what is, be the best version of yourself in moving on, and then move on.
Okay. Final thoughts, y'all. Biba?
Ooh. My final thoughts, as it relates to chosen family, is that in the end of the day, like, you do have a choice. If you find that your family of origin is harmful to you, and you've done what you can to communicate, what you can to stave off the harm or to stop the harm that you're experiencing, and then you make the decision that the best thing for you is to go no contact, then while it's going to be really, really hard, that's probably the best answer. And also seek out support wherever you can with other friends or other your therapist or a coach or trauma informed somebody or other, to talk through what that means. Because like I said earlier, when I made that decision, I wasn't prepared, or nor did I expect to experience all of the other things that went along with it. Like, now you're done, people are asking questions and you got to answer questions, and you have to learn the boundaries and what you're going to tolerate even in that relationship. It's like, that's a parent, so it's like I'm not going to not love that person anymore. Then what does that relationship look like? Because it's still a relationship. It may not be one that you're participating in the way that you were before, but it's still a relationship. It's just less active. And it may not even be forever. So there are going to be some things that come up. I did want to say something really quickly about boundaries too, in that boundaries are, and I know that we talk about that often, but boundaries are really about governing yourself. It's not about necessarily controlling other people. So be very mindful about that kind of language. The other thing too is that make sure that your boundary is a boundary, and a boundary really is something that's still malleable, it's permeable, it's ever changing, it's growing, it's moving, it's shifting, it's doing all sorts of things, but it still exists as you grow and change. So will your boundaries. There will be certain boundaries that you have for yourself that right now seem like the move, and then in the next year you're not that person anymore, and so the boundary that you set is no longer appropriate or aligned with who you are. So make sure you go back to your boundaries just to make sure that they don't become barriers. So that was a big lesson that I learned. My boundaries had become barriers. I like shut it down. There is nothing coming through here. I don't want to hear a reason. I don't want to have a conversation. Nothing's coming. But in creating a barrier for myself here in this, like, I can't move it as I'm growing. It has to basically be destroyed. And of course, that's energy that takes place on my part, because I have to do the work now to take it down and then put up healthy boundaries. And a barrier is still a blockage to you. And I could at that point be able to see how this barrier that I thought was a boundary, how it was blocking certain other aspects and elements of my life that I needed to thrive. And so by doing the work to tear down the barrier as it existed and create a boundary instead, like, it was freeing to me, and it opened up areas of my life that weren't even anywhere near like related to this dynamic. So no barriers, and be sure that you are very mindful about the boundaries that you're creating. Come back to your boundaries, evaluate them, reassess them, reconfigure them as you're continuing to grow. And that's my final word. I know that was a lot. Thank you.
So
Thank you.
from my perspective, we talked in our last episode about getting bangable and about how neurospicy people are far more likely, sometimes, 5 times as likely, depending on which study. Some of them are 10 times as likely. Some of them are, say 70% of neurospicy people identify as non-heterosexual. And, the idea behind this is that many researchers think that because neurospicy people are less likely to adapt to social norms, they are better positioned to question those norms and automatically more willing and able to embrace a non-conforming opportunity that suits them. And the reason I say this is because with all of the challenges and all of the frustrations that each one of us goes through in our own ways, because of course this isn't the oppression Olympics, right? We're not competing against each other, but all of the challenges that we go through in all of our different ways, and all of the times that we have just like, this is not fair. Why do I have to do this? Why is it so much easier for everyone else? the most important point that I would like to make is that feeling, other people near you in your community are feeling exactly the same thing. So you getting out there, you being radically neurospicy, you putting yourself into, the melee of meeting people and engaging and so on and so forth. That is not just something that you are doing or you could be doing to benefit you. You are also then making who you are and the differences of, humanity, you're normalizing. You are becoming someone who can create a path for others. You are making space in a community for other people who, maybe they didn't have that courage to start off with. They had a harder childhood. They have more trauma. They have different trauma. They have, they're unable to overcome that until they see you. Until you are the one who has been coming to this thing for 18 months now, and you have your little friends and you see somebody standing over there awkward like you, and you go over it and you say, "Hey, I've not seen you here before. You look like you're new. I'm Heather. My friends call me Nookie." Right? Like, until that we choose to do this for others, and sometimes doing it for others, especially as neurospicy people, is easier than doing it for ourselves. Right? And it's magical. And that's, to me, that's what chosen family, but also we can choose to create our own futures, our own identities, and who we want to show up as. Authenticity and potential. Let's do it. Let's make those friends. Let's choose those families. Let's invite people in and give them a big hug and, share that sense of acceptance and belonging.
Write the check.
Write the check. Hell yeah.
Y'all, I hope that you see that while it's not easy, it is easier than you're probably making it to be in your head.
And it's easier than being miserable for the rest of your life.
Yes.
I mean, think about that. Like, that's where people get all stuff. I was talking to a client yesterday. I'm going to go off on a little rant here. I was talking to a client yesterday who was like all up in their head about something that had gone on, and was just like, doing that, like anxiety spiral and whatever. And then I was talking to a client just a couple of days ago who was like doing the whole, I'm arguing with my partner over this thing and yada yada. And I said to both of them, I'm like, you got to stop being so comfortable being miserable. You got to be more upset with the fact that you are willing to be miserable than you are with your partner, or more like you got to realize that you can be more comfortable with being uncomfortable than being comfortable with beating yourself up over things, right? Like, just let's start. It's not going to change overnight, but let's start looking at like how we do things and why we do things, and realize that sometimes fighting with our partner is less scary than having a compassionate discussion that might lead to a breakup. We know how fights go. We know that our partner is still there fighting with us, right? But that compassionate discussion, that's where the hurt and the real things could come out. And that's terrifying, right? The anxiety spiral of beating yourself up over the head and wondering if people like you and so on and so forth, that feels comfortable, because if that were an Olympic sport, you'd win a gold medal. You are not yet good at wondering what if or trying new things. That's just a muscle you need to work out. Keep writing the check.
There's a Redditism that I really, really like. They call it the permanent state of tolerable unhappiness.
Ooh.
And it's, yeah,
That sounds
sit
like a
with
heap
that
of
for a
self.
minute.
That sounds like a heap of self betrayal.
It
Mm.
sounds,
Hmm.
huh? Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably what a lot of people just sort of, that's their average day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
And do you really like, that's exactly it. Like, do you want to be unhappy? I know you're good at it. I know you've got lots of experience at it, right? Like, that's okay. But is that what you want? Because if that's what you want, I mean, I do know some people who seem to really be happier being miserable. Okay, but is that really what you want? And again, pause.
And make a choice.
Make a
Okay.
choice. A permanent
I
state of
hope
tolerance.
that this has been, it certainly has been impactful for me. And I hope that you have gotten something meaningful out of this. And I hope that you will go forward and build your chosen families with choice. All right, Biba, where can the people find you?
You can go to my website, www.bibaata.com.
I know. I'm still so proud of you. So proud of you.
Thank
And
you. Thank
Nookie,
you.
the folks can find you at.
Same, my.curiouser.life.
All right, y'all. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for joining us. And we will see you again next time. Have an amazing day.